And we begin with this. Anti-ICE protests erupting in cities across the country. In Austin, Texas, police deployed tear gas to disperse a group of protesters. Further down in Dallas, officials in tactical gear were seen in a face-off with a group of demonstrators. And over in Boston, a rally outside City Hall Plaza with signs that read, "Massachusetts stands with our neighbors in Los Angeles." And in San Francisco, businesses were seen boarding up their establishments as protesters took to the streets there. But here is the latest in the city at the center of it all, Los Angeles, California. 700 active duty Marines are now boots on the ground in LA. In addition to that, the military says they will mobilize another 2,000 National Guard members to respond to protests. They're set to join the 2,000 already in the city. And as of Monday, the LAPD says 50 people were arrested over the weekend following violent clashes that stretched across the 101 freeway. Meanwhile, the feud between California Governor Gavin Newsom and President Trump, well, it's escalating. The president had this to say about Newsom after the governor threatened to sue the White House for sending in troops.
He's an incompetent governor. Look at the job he's doing in California. He's destroying one of our great states. And if I didn't get involved, if we didn't bring the Guard in, and we would bring more in if we needed it, because we have to make sure there's going to be law and order. You had a disaster happening, and they now admit it was a disaster. I watched the chief yesterday, who's a good man, by the way, and he said, "Well, we're lucky we did this because they were overwhelmed. You saw what was happening. So we did the right thing. Everybody agrees to that. But you have a governor who let the city burn down, didn't want water to be sent down to him. I sent billions of gallons of water. I wanted to do it in the first term. He wouldn't do it over, I don't know, they have environmental reasons, but there were no environmental reasons. I think it's just a political philosophy. But it's lucky for the people in Los Angeles and in California that we did what we did. We got it just in time. It's still simmering a little bit, but not very much.
The president followed that up on social media this morning, saying, "If I didn't send in the troops to Los Angeles the last 3 nights, that once beautiful and great city would be burning to the ground right now, much like 25,000 houses burned to the ground in LA due to an incompetent governor and mayor." Governor Gavin Newsom took to social media with a message of his own. He said U.S. Marines are not political pawns, calling the move by the Trump administration a, quote, blatant abuse of power. He ended that post with this, saying, "This is a red line and they're crossing it. Wake up." All right, let's go live now to the ground in L.A., where we find CBS News correspondent Elise Preston. Elise, good to see you again today. It seems like protests yesterday, it simmered down for a bit, but then they ramped back up later in the day. So what happened with the protests last night?
Yeah, they definitely simmered down, Mugo, and you can see in downtown right now, we're right in front of the federal building that we were in front of when we spoke with you yesterday. And it is a very much different scene. Not a lot of police presence out here. Traffic is flowing. These streets have opened back up. In front of the federal building, you will find some National Guardsmen standing at the ready. I just took a gander over there. They do have batons in hand as they're working to protect that federal building. But a very different active scene here when you're thinking about this in comparison to yesterday. Now, yesterday, it was pretty peaceful for the most part, but then we would see little flare-ups erupt here and there. As the day went on, you started to see a few agitators being a little more violent. We saw them throwing bottles at agents' vehicles. We saw them actually kick in those agents' vehicles. And so LAPD officers who were kind of in this street here, they pushed those protesters back to these streets behind us. And so that's where they lingered for several hours. And then as that continued, they were told that they needed to disperse. And it did not happen. For the most part, it did. But there were some protesters who kind of lulled around there. And so that's when officers kind of moved in and they took into custody those protesters who were kind of lingering around in the streets behind the federal building. But we did not see that violence that we saw the night before and the night before that.
Okay, and we know that 700 Marines could arrive in LA as early as today, which today, by the way, marks day 5 of these protests. So are officials there preparing for the same level of, I guess, violence or unrest or looting or craziness that we've seen in the past few days?
Well, state and local officials, they have been asking everyone to remain calm. They have been asking people to stay peaceful, and not only state officials, but also people who have been taking part in these protests. Yesterday, we talked to you about a local California union leader who had been detained while observing at one of the protests. He had been detained and he was actually charged federally with interfering. He says that he was just there being a community observer. Senators, local politicians, the communities all over really advocated for him to be released. So he was released on bail. And after his release, he is also asking people to remain peaceful.
All right. CBS News correspondent Elise Preston, thank you so much for your time. And again, stay safe out there today. All right, so for now, more on all of this, we're going to head over to the White House reaction to all this. And we know CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is there right now. Ed, good to see you today. How is the president and his team justifying sending an additional 2,000 National Guard members and the 700 Marines to the scene in Los Angeles today?
Well, you rattled off there from his Truth Social post a little while ago his current justification that if they hadn't done this, perhaps things would be a little more chaotic in Southern California. Of course, local officials dispute that assertion, but we're now at about just shy of 3,000 either National Guard or military personnel deployed across Southern California, and a sense that they're going to be there for several weeks to come if need be. Of course, if local officials can convince people to stay calm, there may be a point soon where everyone goes, why are they here exactly? But they are protecting those federal buildings there in Los Angeles and standing by for any other potential unrest. We're likely to hear more from the president himself later today when he heads to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, the most populous Army base to mark the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army. This all comes in a week where there's going to be a lot of military pageantry on display at the president's request to mark the Army's birthday, to hold that big military parade here on Saturday in Washington that he's requested since his first term. So we'll see if he uses the opportunity before the troops later today to further explain why it is they continue to deploy personnel there across Southern California.
Yeah, Ed, and as we also mentioned just a few minutes ago in the show, the disagreement between the president and Governor Gavin Newsom, clearly it continues. California has now announced they will sue the Trump administration for the deployment of those troops. Where exactly do things stand right now on that?
Well, the governor has sued, claiming and alleging that it was an illegal order issued by the president because he was supposed to seek the governor's input and have the governor, in essence, make that request. He didn't do it. We'll see where that ends up in federal court and how the Trump administration responds. But they were anticipating, forgive me, this kind of legal challenge and are ready to fight it. And as the president has said repeatedly now in recent days, he doesn't think the governor or LA Mayor Karen Bass or other Southern California officials are handling this situation very well. He has campaigned, Mugo, for the last 10 years as someone worried about law and order, especially in the nation's big cities. And over the last 2 years during his campaign for a second term was suggesting that he would do what has now been done in Los Angeles, that if there were examples of lawlessness in his view, he would bypass mayors and governors and deploy troops as he has. The administration believes they have the right to do so, that Title 10, as it's written, gives the president an authority to deploy troops if needed, to supplement other federal agencies or state and local officials. Of course, the issue here is that nobody in Southern California asked for it. So ultimately, that may be the nexus of the legal fight. Can a president do this even if a state and local leader doesn't ask for it? All of that to be determined in the courts in the weeks and months to come.
And Ed, just real quick for you, has the president responded to these comments from Democrats about how there's a difference in his response to what's going on in LA versus how he responded to the riots, I guess, at the Capitol just years ago?
He has not directly responded to that question. We've started to put that to administration officials. There were some opportunities yesterday where he could have been asked and was not. We'll see if there are today. But it would be interesting to see how exactly he characterizes those that were convicted of carrying out that insurrection at the U.S. Capitol up the street here in Washington versus those he calls insurrectionists or who are carrying out an insurrection in Southern California over the last 5 days.
All right, CBS News senior White House correspondent, political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. As always, thank you so much for your time right here on CBS News 24/7.